Hello there! I'm King Mattress, ruler of Pyst, and I know who you are.
Jwlar.
Myst took the world by storm in the early to mid-90s, quickly entering the pop culture zeitgeist.
It's like he just disappeared into fat air.
Hey, shut up!
For the first time since the golden age of the arcade, video games were once again crawling out from the abyss of a reputation for being children's toys or relegated to only the most tech-savvy of audiences. With over 4 million copies sold, Myst was the best-selling PC game of the 90s, captivating audiences as it was bold enough to be different. Released among a sea of action-filled shooters, stressful platformers and big-brain RPGs, Myst was meditative and serene. The 1993 point-and-click adventure immersed players with intriguing landscapes and challenging puzzles. If they were wise enough to beat it, those sacred players earned major bragging rights, as many of those puzzles were infamously mystifying to downright frustrating. The game was so popular that it has been cited as the main reason for thousands of people upgrading their PCs with a newfangled CD drive. It was only natural then, with Myst on everyone's lips, that some would take the opportunity to satirise the latest fad. Enter Pyst, a game for those who weren't able to complete Myst and found themselves, well, pissed when the tough puzzles had got the best of them. Behind its creation was a jack-of-all-trades comedian, Peter Bergman. You may not have heard of him, but he had a prolific comedy career as a radio host, playwright, Yale University economics scholar, magazine editor, and during a brief stint in medical school, he even helped produce a machine for viewing angiocardiograms and measuring blockages in the arteries of the heart. It's pretty impressive stuff. Bergman belonged to comedy troupe The Firesign Theatre, with other core members such as Philip Proctor, Phil Austin, and David Ossman. In the world of comedy, they were pretty well known, and it's likely that you have heard of their fans, from George Carlin, Robin Williams, Weird Al Yankovic, and Steve Jobs, to name a few. They were even called the Beatles of comedy by the US Library of Congress in 2005. Bergman saw the potential to put his comedy skills to use in the new and exciting PC CD-ROM market to create a multimedia venture, Parity Interactive.
Parody Interactive.
A division from its parent company, Palladium Interactive, Parity set out to create hilarious parodies. Their innovations were ahead of the curve, with Palladium being one of the first companies to introduce members-only tie-ins, granting exclusive content through their interactive website. So new was this technology that every copy of the Pyst disc came bundled with an internet browser, just in case the customer didn't yet have one installed. Pyst was Parity's debut game, and Bergman had the perfect group of comedians on board to make the game a hysterically humorous hit, although the term game may be giving them too much credit. To understand why Parity Interactive chose Myst to become its first parody victim, it's worth understanding what Myst was, and its cultural impact in the 90s. Myst was so successful because it stood out from the crowd. By 2003, the game had been purchased over 6 million times. A first-person 3D rendered point-and-click puzzle adventure, it was nothing like anything on the market. Born from the minds of brothers Rand and Robin Miller, developing under Cyan Worlds. As per the popular storyline tropes of the time, the game begins with the protagonist finding a mysterious object, in this case a book, that magically transports us to another world, Myst Island. The Myst lore runs pretty deep. Between 1993 and 2005, it had spawned 5 main games, 1 spin-off, several novels, and a few failed TV and movie attempts. But here's the gist of it to lay the foundations needed to understand its parody. Of course, spoilers ahead. After arriving on the island, the player discovers a library, finding a couple of books that have trapped the souls of 2 brothers, Cyrus and Achenar. They are the sons of Atros, the man who wrote the books containing the magical power to transport their reader to different ages, where said ages are mini-worlds with puzzles to be solved. The brothers claim that Atros is dead, and each blames the other for their tragedy. Their books, missing several pages, require the player to search the ages to discover more locations and track them down. Once they're collected, the dialogue of the brothers grows clearer, and the player must choose to complete either book to set the corresponding son free, or choose to help neither. Their final pages allude to a mysterious green book that the brothers beg you to avoid. This green book leads us to Atros, still alive but imprisoned. With several endings, Myst provided replay value unexpected from the admittedly underdeveloped adventure game genre of the time. Helping Sirius or Akanar has the player tricked, switching places with either brother to be trapped inside their box, with the true ending revealed by helping Atras, who allows us to explore the island and its various ages as we please, while suggesting a greater evil than even his traitorous sons looms near, setting up the game's direct sequel, Riven. Bergman then had a lot to work with. Pyst released in 1996, 3 years after the source material. What comedic stories have the Firesign Theatre woven into this tale of generational betrayal, combined with serenic pre-rendered backgrounds, multiple endings and mind-bending puzzles? Oh boy.
Let's let these people go, Bob. See you soon.
Running the game natively on modern Windows is impossible, so I had to resort to emulation. This shouldn't have been too much of a problem, I already have a decent working knowledge of DOSBox. Alas, Pyst is a Windows-only product, aimed at Windows 95 and 98, with a workaround backwards compatible mode for Windows 3.1. I have older XP era hardware that could work with an install of Windows 98, it's my childhood PC in fact. The problem is, that bad boy hasn't been switched on in years, and is in dire need of some new capacitors, a motherboard clock battery, and a new hard drive. Thankfully, PC emulation has come a long way. Using PCEmu, I configured a middle-of-the-road Pentium 1 PC, more than powerful enough to run Pyst. If you're wondering if the game is worth playing and you have no other antiquated 90s games that you want to play, let me stop you right here, for PC emulation can be a hell of a troublesome time. Installing the OS isn't the problem, I was able to brush off the cobwebs and get that going just fine. The same can be said for finding and applying the necessary drivers for the graphics card and sound card. I even found a retrofitted version of daemon tools that would allow me to install the abandonware version of the game. Sorry to say, no, I didn't purchase a legitimate copy. As much as I like to collect old software, even I have my limits on what I'll allow on my shelf. All was golden until I launched the game. I wasn't entirely convinced at the time, but I can tell you that, no, the constant noise of frantic masturbation in a variety of different tones and pitches is not the intended sound experience. I spent 3 hours troubleshooting the problem, switching sound cards, sound drivers, multiple restarts of the emulator and my own PC, all to no avail. At one point I had even thought that Pyst had gone out of its way to avoid ridicule and had murdered my GPU in protest, as my screen displayed horizontal scrolling lines after a graphical glitch during a force quit of the game. Oh god, what? Not like this. To my thankful surprise, the DisplayPort cable had managed to dislodge just enough to cause this issue at the same time. Talk about timing. On my knees, I remembered the same mantra I bring up in every retrospective. Old games expect you to read the manual. I read it, and it didn't help. But what did was the readme text file hidden in the game's installation folder. There it was, the solution to my problem. Simply editing some sound values in the QuickTime software that is needed to run the game. 3 hours condensed into a 10-second fix. Let's just say I hate Apple even more now. Diving into Pyst. Finally working, the game launches to a decent start, a send-up of Myst's opening, mocking Atras' opening voiceover, and giving us our first view of the island.
I realized the moment I fell into the fissure that the book would not be destroyed as I had planned. It continued falling into that starry expanse of which I had only a fleeting glimpse.
I realized the moment I stepped into that manhole cover that my day was off to a rocky start. As I fell through the inky abyss, I tried to flap my arms, but it didn't seem to help. It was then I realized that I was on a trip that could only end in one place.
The core premise of Pyst is that this is Myst Island, as it would look after all of that game's players had visited. 4 million people trampling, exploring and living there have turned it into a wreck. influenced by the scenes of massive festivals that often leave the same result. In Pyst's case, Woodstock 94 was fresh on the mind of the writing team. Stories of 5,000 people treated for medical issues during the carnage, 2 deaths, and iconic imagery of artists being pelted with bottles and mud. Depositing us on the docks, as in the original game, that influence can be seen clearly. Rather than sounds of the ocean gently breaking upon the pier, we're greeted by squawking gulls and the faint sound of vomiting. Unlike Myst, where we are to believe that the screen in front of us is the first-person viewpoint of our protagonist, Pyst displays its scenes as postcards sent from the destination. Why anyone would use these photographs for their postcard is a mystery. If I was to guess, this was probably meant to poke fun at how Myst was built with a piece of software called HyperCard. Moving our mouse around the screen to discover what can be interacted with, we find Pyst's gameplay. Yeah, what gameplay? They're just hotspots, which when clicked are followed by an animation and sound clip. Arrows at the top and bottom of the screen flip each postcard over to reveal voiced messages from previous visitors, and pressing the oblong speaker at the bottom activates a brief guided tour for each location, provided by 2 over-eager employees, Bob and Cheryl, working for a real estate developer known as Octoplex Corporation.
This dock, the jumping off point for millions and millions of players, is going to be demolished and turned into a jet ski marina and ferry landing.
Do ferries swim?
Ferry boats, Bob. They're for the lucky condominium owners who will commute from the mainland.
Parity Interactive claims that everyone that plays Pyst will win, and that's true because there is no way to lose. Where is the game? Well, Pyst isn't one. Like, I can't imagine a decent argument for this being a game in any sense of the word. There is no objective, no fail state, no reward or victory point. An attempt is made to compensate for this lack of real game elements with plenty of video. It's what we would now call an interactive experience. It's true that some of Myst's detractors heap scorn upon its slideshow-like presentation as constituting it as a non-game. Perhaps then Pyst's parody runs deeper than surface-level jabs, mocking Myst on a meta level. Yeah, no, I'm throwing the thesaurus at this to give it way too much credit. In reality, it's as bad as you may have heard, and if you are blessed enough to have never had the misfortune of seeing a Parity Interactive game in the past, then strap yourself in for a ride. That's the real Pyst. I'd like to say it gets better, but it doesn't. If I had to suffer through this, so do you. There's no minigames, no puzzles, no anything really. The box sticker exclaims how this isn't the real game, so let's just change that. Much better. Hey, it's a parody product. Analysing its lack of gameplay is missing the point. Pyst hinges on the quality of its writing and gags as it takes us on a satirical tour.
Dear Agnes, I am revolted and shocked by the depravity of this dreadful island. I was told by the nice man at the computer store that this was a reservoir of classic values. It's a reservoir, all right.
And that's the problem. Every wisecrack, joke, and skit comes across as the dull first draft that is yet to land, or have a punchline, or any semblance of a joke.
We have arrived, Lord Fader.
This is the level of funny we're dealing with here. On top of the Woodstock theme, we have that jab at overdeveloped resort destinations ran by shady real estate firms.
Well, I'm still a little pissed about having to move out of my trailer, Cheryl. What's Octoplex got in mind for this?
It's part of Phase 2, so it's still up in the air.
Well, maybe I can move in.
It's either going to be a mini motocross stadium, a do-it-yourself heart clinic, or a Lava Java cafe.
Isn't there already a Lava Java on the other side of the island?
Can't have enough Lava Javas, Bob.
The Octoplex Corporation has big plans to turn Pyst into a holiday community with condominiums, a golf course, and even a beach area without a sea.
What you're looking at is the future site of the Octoplex Seaside Beach, with one little difference.
What's that?
No sea.
Wait a minute, no water?
Octoplex's researchers discovered that people who go to the beach love the sand and the sun, but they don't like the water.
The player is a potential customer, no doubt about to fall victim to a timeshare scam as the real estate agents whisk us around the island on their tour before the renovation work begins. The juxtaposition between their positivity as they fight for their commission against the dire backdrop of a toxic green landscape is meant to garner laughs. At best, there were some occasions I chuckled, but I cannot guarantee if that was just out of pity. Really, this joke hasn't aged very well, as these sorts of mega resorts have died out, at least on my side of the pond. We used to have places like Butlins that tried such business ventures to great success through the 20th century, but now you're more likely to catch an STD from a stray needle than have a good time at one of them. Thinking about it though, that makes it even funnier in the world of Pyst, as Octoplex would barely have to do any work at all to match the quality standard. Aging poorly is the main theme, a curse bestowed upon anything that steeps itself heavily in pop culture references. In time, those references lose meaning, or are so overdone that seeing them can't help but make us roll our eyes or cringe.
Princess, what's got you down?
Look, it's not like I hate everybody who is over 25. But I just think, it would be so cool if we had this place where our music was the main music, our books are the main books, where we made the rules and didn't have to follow them.
Oh, like a mall.
Yeah, like a mall. Wouldn't that be great?
This continues onto those postcard backs. Each one seems to take jabs at various American stereotypes. I might be reading too much into this, but being a New York-based comedy troupe, the Firesign Theatre seem to aim some of their humour at mocking the stereotypical dumb southerner. This may be funny to some and offensive to others, but for those outside of the American culture sphere, it's mostly confusing. Only the one recurring theme of the down on his luck soon-to-be divorcee got a sly smile out of me.
Honey, I'm sorry. Please let me back. I've been camped out in the open under the trees for a week. Have you disconnected the phone? I hope you get this because you're a Taurus and Dr. Astro says this is the time of the year you forgive. Dear Honey's mom. Sorry I can't remember your name. Where's Honey?
As an American-only release, its writing would be understandable, yet not only did this come out across Europe, it even had a German dub. From what I could find, it had relatively complex text translations, even having some of the rendered pictures and jokes localized, as well as a full video dub that doesn't even try to lip-sync.
Guten Tag, ich bin König Macho, Herrscher von Pyst, und ich weiß, wer Sie sind.
In some ways, that's actually funnier than the original language. Still though, I cannot imagine that the humour landed well overseas at all, and I don't have to imagine because the sole German review that I could find in PC Games says as much, giving Pyst an amazing 20%. I don't want this retrospective to lean too much into the OK Boomer angle, but a lot of the takes in Pyst can't help but trigger that feeling in my millennial brain, like these on-the-nose Pyst takes at grunge and metal bands.
Formerly known Productions, in association with Brand Loyalty, present Be Scared or Be Squared, a Pyst post-punk rave featuring Puss, Maidenfur, and Gallows! No one admitted without a nose ring!
Moving to the second postcard, which isn't done by traversing the island, as in Myst by clicking on paths or doors, and is instead replaced with a basic arrow to move to the next screen, we enter the so-called crash pad.
This primitive cave was once the ceremonial center for the Aboriginals of Pyst.
Much of the banter relies on wordplay, as with the festival poster. Take the names of these ruling nobles of the island. Prince Syrup.
Oh, you startled me. I'm Prince Syrup.
King Mattress.
I'm King Mattress, ruler of Pyst.
And...
I'm the prince, formerly known as Prince.
Okay, I actually like that one. They're mocking the fantastical names of Cirrus and Atras. The wit is barely of note. It is funny though to highlight that there weren't any princes or King Atlas in Myst, it's just Atlas. He's not the king of anything, despite the specificity in Pyst. It almost feels like it was made by people who half remembered the game, targeted at an audience who half remembered the game. These three characters would appear to be parodied in Myst's characters, but there is no relation to those ones at all. These guys instead follow basic stereotypes. The prince, formerly known as Prince, is a sex pest.
If you need anything, and I mean anything, don't hesitate to come back and ask.
And certified nonce.
Dear Mary at girlschool.com. Whether you were the little blonde from St. Catherine's, you have to move on.
Prince Syrup is a germaphobe that deals with anxiety and other behavioral problems.
This island is a nightmare since all of you arrived. Clicking and snooping and spreading germs and
And King Mattress is an evil king that looks down on others.
And you're a pest. No, player, and all the players merely pests. You know, it's very stressful being the king of pain. No, the king of the game? Yes, I am the king of the game.
And interestingly parodies modern-day Trump.
Kick out all the riffraff, close the island, build a wall.
Although that obviously wasn't the intention at the time. As you've seen on the thumbnail, John Goodman is indeed here, and his inclusion may be perplexing. Was he really that down on his luck that he needed this humiliating paycheck? In actuality, Bergman and Goodman go way back, and it's clear from the behind the scenes footage that we'll look at later that this was really some mates kicking back and having fun, hoping to make a laugh-worthy product as a result of their good times. Unfortunately, fun had making the game did not result in a fun game. Moving over to the trailer park, and I gotta say I appreciate the great restraint that must have come with not having a sex gag assigned to one of the abodes. Instead we have deadbeat parent gags.
Hey, shut up, kid! Tell you what, sweetie, let's watch some TV, then we'll decide.
Okay.
Actually, a sex gag would have been better. Discussing graphical and visual design for a product of this caliber isn't worth it, but you can't really miss the discrepancies between the original Myst background, the new 3D rendered additions, and then whatever the hell these clip art abominations are. They don't even fit in the scene. I get that Myst was made in HyperCard, but that doesn't mean you should strive to make Pyst look like it's made in PowerPoint. The obsession with animal humor is interesting. Their inclusion though makes much more sense when you see how much fun the developers had making and implementing them.
Here we're basically talking about the Bergman poop factor. I figure that in order for us to really understand that the bird's taking a poop, we have to poop twice. Can you show me what that looks like then? Once, and then it'll come again. Oh, yes.
As I mentioned before, many of these jokes continue to mock lower class Americans, which isn't anything new for comedy, but the way to handle it is with absurdity, not by punching down. Then again, Pyst does lean on absurdity, and it's in those absurd angles that I ever felt an inkling of emotion.
Why, just the other day, I picked up this pack of potato chips at the Pyst snack shop. Brought it to a party, opened it up, and snakes!
My favourite bit was these star sign jokes on the 4th postcard, not because they're all that good, but for the fact that the amount of dialogue here is longer than the rest of the game combined. They managed to garner a smile out of me by sheer attrition.
Capricorn, the goat. This sign has been cancelled due to lack of interest.
Maintaining that feeling of first draft writing, a lot of the visual gags are entirely surface level. Like this joystick on the chair is now a flight simulator joke, because joystick equal flying.
Warning, warning! You are entering enemy airspace! Enemy target sighted! Rockets and cannon armed! Incoming! Incoming! Enemy target in range! Fire at will!
Haha, very funny. It's only on the 5th postcard, over halfway through this so-called game, that we actually reach a point where Pyst shows what it should have been. A parody of Myst, not just an outlet to expose random cultural references. The notes here play on the anger players had at the puzzles and actually characterizes the source material as one would expect based on the marketing.
I guarantee access to all 4 ages. I haven't lost a player yet.
Get all the blue and red pages or your money back!
Are you an addict? Gamers Anonymous. Meeting every night in the tower, if you can find us.
But you know what's really odd? Pyst barely comments on Myst at all outside of this, ignoring the audience it seemed to be aiming at. It's not like the Firesign Theatre were unaware of the game. Bergman himself recalled the birth of Pyst's idea. I was playing Myst and just couldn't get out of the library scene in the game, and said I'm so pissed at this game. Then a light bulb went on. Of course, a send-up. Defined as giving an exaggerated imitation of someone or something in order to ridicule them, Pyst is technically a send-up, but it rarely ridicules Myst as a game, and instead pokes fun at its popularity as a phenomenon. According to Palladium's president, Ed Bernstein, Pyst had to be a transformative work that moved way beyond Myst, so as to avoid legal trouble with the original publisher, Broderbund, which is an understandable stance to have. The last thing Palladium wanted was a lawsuit on their hands, except for the fact that fair use allows parody under the copyright laws. That's why Weird Al Yankovic got away with all of his musical numbers. Besides, Myst's publisher seemed entirely fine with the parodies, saying, "We've seen imitators and they usually just give us a good chuckle." The funny thing is that I actually think it's a good gag to suggest that the popularity of Myst could translate in-universe to the island becoming an overcrowded, garbage-filled hellhole, especially to think that people would have intentionally trashed it out of frustration with the puzzles, but they didn't really build anything funny atop that premise. It's ultimately not amazing, but at least it's something I'd chuckle about if someone proposed the idea while we were out having a beer. And that's exactly Pyst's problem. Everything feels like the initial burst of laughter from a group of lads around a table down the pub, where you're all giddy already and every bit added by someone adds to the laughs, but to everyone else around you, you're being loud and obnoxious, and what you're saying isn't really that humorous because they're lacking the context.
It's gone! That's heavy water!
Thanks to behind-the-scenes footage available in HD over on my second channel and linked in the description of this video, despite the failings of the game itself, the making of Pyst seemed to be an absolute blast. It was akin to the pub metaphor, friends coming together to have a good time, and maybe make a bit of money in the process. Bergman had a phone book full of comedians to bring with him, with the credits stacked with talented people that he loved to work with. Firesign Theatre's comedy stars were all on board, along with others that had appeared on Bergman's comedy radio show, Radio Free Oz. Ironically, this short parody involved more people in its creative process than the game it is based upon, with the credits dwarfing that of Myst. Most famous of all the cast was of course movie star John Goodman, at the time best known for sitcom Roseanne. Describing his connection with Goodman, Bergman said, "John and I have been working together for a while now. He's an old radio head. He's really a radio man. I've been working with him in a radio context for years now." They brought in Fred Newman to record vocal sound effects with the hope of adding a distinct comedic character to the sound design.
Ladies and gentlemen, who I think might perhaps maybe the best orifice working in the business today, Mr. Fred Newman.
I can't say this really worked. Much of the effects I had wrongly believed to be from a standard sound library, which aligns more closely with the overall quality of the game's design. But on the other hand, it also highlights the skill of Newman to so perfectly emulate such effects. With his prolific work for Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel, he was a professional in the field. The making of video is far more enjoyable than playing the game, perfectly displaying where the troupe's talents lay in designing a comedic show that is meant to be passively consumed. Their skill set doesn't translate to an interactive medium, where timing and editing cannot be used to pace the laughs and feel good nature. The importance of pacing and sound design can make or break something like this, and where this mini documentary succeeds, the game itself fails. I must also wonder whether this making of video was an intentional parody of the making of video included with Myst, or if it is just a quirky coincidence that they both had one. Being more fun to make than it was to play, this was the problem that Parody Interactive never overcame. Their other parodies are equally shunned by the gaming community as well as reviewing poorly. Back to the Pyst, and the less I say about this postcard, the better.
Captain Hazelwood! What? We're going on the rocks! On the rocks? Good. And make the next drinky a little drier.
But seriously, this is the level of comedy throughout. If you found that funny, then that's great, you are someone who would like Pyst, but I don't think I'm crazy in believing that most are going to stare at their screen in boredom or bewilderment. Venturing into the TV garden, Pyst is no longer trying to hide that this is a disconnected amalgamation of cutaway gags.
Hi, Max Midas here, and we've closed the clock on the marker switches. Boy, they sure went fast. Well, here comes a product that's really gonna fly. So get your Pyst money, your pizzasters ready. Because for the first time on the Pyst shopping channel, we're offering the original pillars from the Pillar Garden.
A huge television here plays a series of 60-second skits that I wouldn't be surprised to find were old material salvaged from the cutting room floor and revived for this single scene.
I hacked the Pyst cable system. I'm controlling the transmission, me, Hacker X. Oh, it took me 5 days without sleep, and I burned through 3 166 megahertz processors, 4 28.8 modems, and 2 monitors, but I'm here.
I'll be kind and admit this penultimate slide, the Chernobyl room, is my favourite. It perpetrates the tired mantra of nuclear energy bad, but at least it does it in a comedic manner.
Scram while the getting's good! That's heavy water! Whoa!
It's here that I realised that perhaps Pyst was made with children in mind. I mean, this three-headed rat with its over-the-top performance would go down a storm with kids. But then again, with its name, child predator nobility, and otherwise dire jokes, I'd be surprised if a kid had the attention span strong enough to carry them through to this point. The general consensus on Bergman's approach to gaming can be entirely surmised by this piece of graffiti. Bring back Pong. This aversion to the complexities of the growing gaming market isn't uncommon for members of his generation, and I'm sure many of us have heard similar opinions from the uncles and aunts in our own families, where games are too violent or complicated now. What happened to the good old days of the arcade with Pac-Man and Space Invaders? Coming to the final slide, and Goodman, well, he's been utterly wasted.
I could show you a whole other side of Pyst Island that you've never experienced. Yes, no, yes, you haven't. And you won't, because I'm saving it for the sequel.
It's possible that he was only on set for one day though. He must have been a busy man. His contributions are limited, with his best performance in the game being the included song that equally has little association to the actual world that Pyst presents. It isn't even part of the game other than being accessible through the menu. It's never alluded to in the game either. That song though is an absolute banger.
Sitting here in my living room and I just can't seem to shake the glue. I'm pissed. Man, I just can't change my ugly mood. Yes, I am one unhappy dude. I'm pissed.
I doubt it's copyrighted, but for the sake of brevity, which I thought I'd never say, let's move on. If you are interested in hearing the rest of the song, again it can be found on the second channel. The same can be said for the entire playthrough of the game, including every single clickable gag. If you want to torture yourself just as I did, have a good time. I'll be sitting here content with an overwhelming sense of schadenfreude. Calling Pyst a multimedia experience is being kind to the overall product. The website, which promises to continue the fun, is mostly a means for the publisher to advertise their other products. This entire site looks more like the publisher's site than anything else, despite the domain claiming that it is for Pyst. At best, there are a few ancient Shockwave games, so old that they are called Shockwave games and not Flash games. I can't say if they're any good, as the web archive was unable to preserve them, but at best they may have actually been a game rather than a glorified slideshow. You could dial a phone number scribbled on the wall in the horoscopium, allowing the caller to interact with the characters from Pyst Island. I dialed it, but lo and behold, the number is dead. What was unique was the website's members-only area, where those that had registered their copy of the game could hang out in exclusive chat rooms, post on the bulletin boards, and access extra goodies, like sending your own Pyst postcards to friends over email and accessing extra skits that were only made available online. This information came from Computer Gaming World's November 1996 preview, so whether the functionality ever became a reality is harder to confirm. I had no luck finding the area on the web archive archive myself, but if it did exist, at least it sounds like a cool idea for fans of the game, that is, if such people even existed. My points aren't just overly critical modern day takes. Reviewers from the time were almost universally disinterested with Pyst. PC Gamer and Game Revolution, among many others, had no love for the misguided parody, with the latter kindly calling it definitely the absolute worst game I've ever played. Parity Interactive surely imagined that some portion of those millions who bought Myst would buy Pyst, and they did. With a retail price point of $15, it was always meant to be a discount product, not anything to take super serious. Palladium claimed that it had sold more than 200,000 copies worldwide. Surely someone must have liked it, right? Well, I managed to find one positive review from PC Multimedia and Entertainment Magazine. This reviewer was the ideal audience member, admitting how he hated Myst, which I'm sure helped his opinion somewhat. And his reasonings align perfectly with lots of modern game journalism, as he states, "In Pyst, there's no need to figure anything out, and no way to get stumped. Click on anything that's clickable, get a few laughs, and keep clicking to the right until the game is over. It doesn't take long at all. Actually, my wife had played through it in 30 to 35 minutes, but it was so funny. Well, maybe I thought it was a little funnier than my wife did, but nonetheless, it was a riot." I wouldn't blame you if you thought that was sarcastic, but no, he gave the game a 75%, its highest review score, based on a thrilling 30 minutes of gameplay and seagull feces. There is technically one more positive review, but it's from the Firesign Theatre's online magazine. I can't help but notice the bias here. They praised Bergman's approach, stating that he continues to survey America's culture and obsessions like a maniacal monitor, reflecting the absurdness of it all, while casting his iconoclastic eye to read the entrails of the present course and our delirious future. Undoubtedly, this is marketing. I wouldn't be surprised if the article was written by Bergman himself. Parity Interactive wasn't deterred by those less than stellar reviews. Sales were still notable, and as we've seen, they had a good time making Pyst. They came together to collaborate and create 4 more games before their parent publisher was bought by the Learning Company in 1999. Although it should be noted that Bergman and the Firesign Theatre were not directly involved with the games after Pyst. They released those 4 games in 3 years, a very fast turnaround compared to the ballooning development times of the late 90s. Before being dissolved by their new owners, Parity Interactive's 5th game was to be a direct sequel to Pyst, and parody of Myst sequel Riven, dubbed Driven. A demo was even released in a special edition version of Pyst before Riven itself was even released, truly showing how important it was to the team to parody the game and not just its name. It looks more visually impressive and possibly closer to an actual game of sorts. However, it goes without saying that Driven? When the word drivel exists? That's just lazy, they weren't even trying. A bit of an aside, Peter Bergman unfortunately passed away in 2012. As much as I believe Pyst to be a poor showing of comedy, the man himself was really funny. I suggest looking at his other work like Radio Free Oz to see what he was really about. He had talent, he and his team just struggled to translate it into a video game.
This is Radio Free Oz, KRLA 1110 on your radio dial, and baby, it's the sweetest thing going down.
There was just bizarre, wonderful audio comedy. It's the audible equivalent of a Hieronymus Bosch painting, and you're always looking for the little guy in the back with the 3 legs coming out of the ass of a chicken. That's what was, for me, kind of interesting. That's why I went, I'm in!
Are you still here? Can't you see that I'm brushing my kitties? A king needs his privacy. Therefore I declare myself private.
Not even John Goodman is enough to save Pyst. It's neither a game nor particularly funny as a joke. The idea sounded fun, but the implementation is poor. If there is anything subversive about Pyst, it's how it sabotages Myst's sense of privilege. As Scott Rosenberg, reporting for Salon.com, succinctly states, Myst made its users feel special. If you could make your way through its secret passages, you were an initiate, a savant. Pyst says, forget that. you're just part of a herd of loud, dirty, inconsiderate tourists, destroying the virtual environment as fast as your computer can generate it. If you want to big brain it, Pyst stands as a scathing review of the state of Western mass consumerism and its populace's disregard for their environmental impact. At least that's how Bergman saw it in the 90s. Its stances are obvious throughout, and for a game I chose for April Fools as a subject to mock and laugh at, I was surprised to find any deeper meaning to it, even if its deeper meanings aren't exactly radical. Why these statements were made in what should have been a parody of Myst is the main issue. The Firesign Theatre used Myst as a platform to project their style of humour, a soapbox to stand on if you will, and humour is highly subjective. Some did enjoy Pyst, even if they were in the minority. If one was to be cynical, Pyst could be described as a cash grab, a hope to sell at least a few copies of a cheaply made piece of software to a percentage of the millions that bought Myst. I like to see it instead as a group of mates coming together to have a good time, but compared to the corporatism of modern game development, I can't help but smile at a product made from passion and fun, even if it should never again be touched with a 10-foot barge pole. To conclude, please for the love of your sanity, don't play and certainly don't try to analyze Pyst. If you think a game such as this can be enjoyed in a so bad it's good kind of way, you're wrong. Thanks for watching, and a huge thanks to the YouTube members and patrons who help make these videos possible. As always, I'll see you in the next one.